Struggling to discuss sex and intimacy with your partner?
Not feeling met, seen, or heard in your relationships?
I'm Janelle.
And I'm Andrea. We're two midlife mavericks sharing our own experiences.
Messy AF and no regrets.
With marriage, divorce, polyamory, and pleasure.
We've learned that when you're brave enough to figure out what you want and ask for it,
with partners, friends, family, and most importantly, yourself,
you'll feel more alive and free.
Question everything, especially your mother's advice.
There's no rom-com formula for this, but don't panic.
Being alone matters. Honey, I can't miss you if you don't leave.
What if your breakup could be your breakthrough?
Our podcast is for brave hearts.
Anyone who seeks or has found the courage to confront their fears and limiting beliefs about breaking societal norms in the spirit of finding their truth.
If you're seeking permission to be brave in your relationships
and want to feel less alone along the way, we got you. Okay, Bravehearts, this is a different kind of episode coming up. Andrea just interviewed me and one of my lovers, John, he and I just discussed kind of in real time this like one incredible date that we have had so far.
Yeah, in this episode, you will hear real life examples of how more and more and more vulnerability led to more pleasure. You'll hear about leading with desire when reflecting to each other and having these difficult conversations about sex and intimacy.
Pleasure is inside of us.
Yes. Honor your boundaries. Have no agenda. And be committed to your container. This is an especially juicy episode, all about Janelle and her lover John. So, Bravehearts, you're gonna love this. So real time, so raw, so honest.
Thanks for listening.
Hi, Bravehearts. Welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
And today, Janelle will be our host and our guest.
Woot!
Hey, If you've been listening, this is our final installment of our 12-part series in how to talk to your partner about sex and intimacy. We have had some major mic drop moments. We've had some really good wisdom nuggets. We've interviewed experts. We've interviewed each other. And now we are interviewing Bravehearts. Today, we'll be interviewing Janelle and one of her lovers, John.
Okay, I'm already getting a little warm in the collar here.
Racing. So what I'm going to do is have Janelle and John introduce themselves in their current situation. And then we'll get to the fun questions. Mm-hmm. Janelle, you go first.
Hi, Bravehearts. Many of you know I live in Denver. I have 2 female housemates. But in terms of relationships, I consider myself solo poly. And what that means is that I am in relationship with myself first. And from that place, then I relate to others.
And John, what about you?
Yeah, I'm John Wolfstone. I'm currently in the Bay Area, California. I'm in a life transition wander, but I know Janelle from Colorado, where I'm from. And, I'd say that my primary partner in life is the goddess. And that's something I've been cultivating for years. And that I think I'm in a process of understanding how humans fit into that after that keeps strengthening and deepening. Me and Janelle have a curious, interesting container unfolding that I guess we'll get into here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I would describe our container, and John, feel free to elaborate on it. I call it a comet. And I'm forgetting, Bravehearts, if we've talked about this or not before on the podcast, but where like 2 people come together for a period of time, whether it's for a few hours or a few days, and they really are in presence with intention and attention on one another. And when that when we leave, like we're recharged and we're nourished and we feel like all excited and we bring that energy back into our lives. But not we're not actually in contact on the everyday.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious about that, but John, I'd like to hear your version now.
I mean, I feel called just to share maybe the like really short story about
Hmm.
how this came to be. When I met Janelle, I recognized her as this archetype that has been coming back as a comet in my life of this very elegant, beautiful, confident, regal woman that in some ways scares the shit out of me because it somehow also like matches some of my deepest core wounds. And then somehow later I got invited to her 50th birthday party, which I was helping in this ritual role with. We got to deepen a bit more there. But then really it was a year later at Yana's 50th birthday, which just happened a few months ago, that life put me and Janelle on a similar track because I ended up giving her a ride. And we really hit it off. And I felt just this contact and this connection when we started talking about her work and my work and the overlaps. And I just felt this growing attraction and kind of daring in myself to really name it and name my desire. And there came a point over the course of this ritual evening um, where I was like, wow, uh, Janelle, like essentially, I think you're hot. Like I desire you. I desire your soul. And
Hmm.
I want to go deeper with you. Like, how can that happen? And then this is how this conversation around being a comet and what that means and what we're both looking for. And it just really matched that it seems that our souls have something they want to like trade. You know, there's some soul medicine that wants to come through and like that wants to ride on the wings of Eros. Um, and we started creating really like playfully this quite uh, delicious vision of a container that's very contained and strong, but very much not like you're going to be my person and I'm going to be your partner and like none of the, I guess, attachments that often happen that we often feel we need as humans to be in sexuality with each other. And something's begun to unfold that's, yeah, quite alternative. I'd say quite mature and very juicy.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing that to create a comet relationship, there has to be a really matching vision.
Yeah, I think there has to be. I mean, for like me and where I'm at in my life, I'm curious. Janelle, also there has to be enough like yes that I want to like spend intentional time to go and meet this person for some short but potent container that uh, repeats. And I think at where I'm at, that means our like souls have to be vibrating at some kind of same frequency. And
Okay.
so I'd say that there is like a desire just for the sexual exploration, but there's also this evolutionary edge that I feel like me and Janelle found that also is what gives this a lot of power and is like I think what is supporting it to happen.
Hmm.
Okay, so I want to, I really want to get to like the structure of this. Like, what does this look like? Like, how, how often do you see each other? Is there zero contact between? Do you text? Do you talk? Do you Zoom? You're not living in the same state potentially. So I really want, like, what are the nuts and bolts of this for our brave hearts to understand this? And we will get to the talking about sex and intimacy.
So what we came up with, John and I together, on this night at this birthday party, was creating a container of 3 dates, 3 days each,
Okay.
and they're not those dates are not set in stone. Like we don't know when they're going to happen, but that we also decided to do what we called a preamble, like one overnight, like 24-hour date before everything started, just to like ride the energy and the excitement of how we felt towards one another, but also just to see, like, is this actually a viable thing? Do we really want to spend 3 days 3 times with each other?
Okay.
And I can also share that part of that idea of this commitment that we're stepping into of having three 3-day dates was Janelle's kind of prompting of like, well, I want to know how deep we can go. And in my professional work, being a container builder, it was like, hey, how am I going to create a solid enough container that has enough safety and enough structure and enough clarity that we can actually unfurl? And that's why for like me, it wasn't just, oh, let's just have one and then see. It was like, let's like really commit to some kind of arc that has some heft, because that's going to allow our bodies, our psyches, our eros to really unfold and not just back away at the first point of friction.
Okay, so a very alternative format, both consciously committed. And so when did the talks about sex and intimacy begin, and how did they begin, and what did that look like?
I mean, I can say that they really began that night that we were, I mean, we were at a place where we were not all wearing much clothes, and there was a lot of eros flowing in the room, and we had started to kiss at some point. And I feel like Janelle, given the training she has and who she is as a very empowered sexual woman, was just clearly naming from the start what she desired. We were talking about the nature of desire and how much of a turn on that like is. And we were just from the like start kind of navigating this very vulnerable, like, I want this and how does that feel and what do like you want? And for like me, that's really what drew me in to be like, oh, I really want to see how far this can like go. And then it's kind of been that continual dance where I feel that our desire and really creating like almost a vision of a desire-led connection is what's been happening. So I'd say that it's like we're constantly in a conversation involving sex and like intimacy, and that the conversation itself feels like a extension of our erotic space.
John, you said in the beginning that that Janelle was very forward and very honest from the beginning about her attraction and her desire. She knew what she wanted and she said it.
Yeah.
And
I feel like actually we did the RBDSM conversation, right? Just like kind of like on the fly in that moment. And that was actually the structure of the framework that we used to name our desires and name what was alive for us and like our relationship formats. And so Bravehearts, as you know, with this conversation, what was so rich is like, you know, John and I were just discovering each other. And that's where it was like, oh, like here's my relationship format style and way of seeing the world. And his matched mine. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, so that's where like the turn on kept coming as the deeper we got through the questions.
Was there ever any hesitation? I think that's with our Bravehearts, or with sort of, say, the average person is talking about sex and intimacy. They're afraid to be like, well, what if that person doesn't like me? Or what if they don't feel the same? Is it okay to voice what I'm wanting? And so can you tell me how that felt, or if there was hesitation and how that went?
Yeah, on my end, there was about a year when I had Janelle on some sort of pedestal, and I was like totally afraid and totally felt like there was no way this woman was out of my league, was the honestly of like how I felt. And it like each moment on that first night at that second birthday that we started to connect, each moment I felt very timid. And yet there was like just enough safety, or I had just enough of my own brave heart to just take it like a little dip. Like I felt what I did, I very much titrated my own desire. Like I was dipping my toes in the pond ever deeper. And that was its own form of courtship that I think allowed it to unfold.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I just want to call it the RBDSM conversation. Again, stands for relationship, boundaries, desires, sexual health, meaning in this context. Janelle, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I'm actually really enjoying like like hearing John's description. And so I just feel like I want to like match him, right? Like he's describing like the vulnerability that he had and like just declaring, and he shared some of that, you know, with me. And I was like, oh, like I noticed you that first night a year ago, you know, like I had tracked him maybe not in the same way he did, but like in the same way of like, oh, like I'm aware of him, I'm aware of his energy, and what I felt as we were like, in the drive and on that night, and as this conversation happened, like I felt in my own body like, oh, I'm getting more relaxed, my heart is opening more, and I'm getting more turned on with all of that because of he was being so open and vulnerable. Like he was saying, hey, I'm a little bit nervous about this, or I'm feeling a little bit intimidated. And then so we got to meet with that. He didn't like pretend that that wasn't part of what he was feeling. And then I got to be more like receptive and be like, oh, that's yeah, like I want to say so sweet, but it was a sweetness that like penetrated my heart.
So I think I'm hearing that you were both so vulnerable with each other and weren't afraid to be vulnerable. And that's what established this really clear channel of communication and honesty from the beginning.
Yeah, and I can say that there's been this dance of being in the presence of desire and courtship, and at the same time, reflecting on what's happening, but in some kind of way that doesn't pull us out. I mean, there's kind of a way that you can reflect in a dynamic with another human, be like, oh, can we like have a pause and like talk about how this is, and that's fine, but it can be a little bit less graceful and a little bit more awkward. And there's somehow just the dynamic between Janelle and I where that reflection became part of the desire and the juice. I mean, you guys can't see me, but I'm having my hands kind of swirling around where there's this way that our consciousness is weaving with desire and being like, oh, like we like kissed and like I noticed that felt this way, and what I'm wanting even more of is this. Like that was literally, I think, happened after our first kiss from Janelle, and it was just so graceful because she wasn't criticizing or she wasn't necessarily having some big emotional process, but she was being like, oh, that felt like this, and I want more of this. And that, like, leading it with desire, I think is what kept that reflection juicy and in the space of turn on. Yet, as she was also redirecting what was happening towards more of her pleasure.
Beautiful. So I think this is another just really big mic drop moment for where the rubber meets the road in people talking about sex and intimacy, is that being able to say, oh, I liked this, but I'd love more of this. And I remember, like I said, some of my own experience doing that and feeling courageous to say it, and my partner being surprised, and then 3 minutes later, him telling me, oh, I really like it when you do this. And so it was, kind of being a model for each other. But I also hear, kind of weaving in with our conversation with another Braveheart, Yana, in that you're weaving the reflection into the desire.
Yeah.
And I know Yana spoke to like one of the most important points of communication with lovers is, oh, I'm sharing, and then you're just reflecting back what you heard. So I feel like this is taking the reflection to another level, in that you're not only reflecting, but you're also then adding a desire on. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A couple questions come up for me. One, how did you create a safe container when you met at a party, right? And you were like around a lot of other people, and maybe it wasn't quiet or it was safe. So one, how do you do that? And were there any stumbling, awkward moments that you had to navigate with in talking about sex and intimacy with such a new person?
I feel like we just, like, in terms of like when that one of our deeper conversations happened, like there was people all around us, but we were just like in our own little bubble, and we had just like locked in on one another. But I will say, like, the night could have continued on, right? Like, like sex could have been on the table. Like we could have gone back to our rooms where we were each staying, like outside of like the party space. But what I was aware of was that I was also starting to lose presence, right? It was late, and I am not like a late night person. And I was able to be like, oh, I really feel something here, and I know that I'm at my capacity. I want to be fully present if I'm going to be with you, like
Mm.
more, like intimately, and I just don't have that right now in me.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, in general, what's been part of our connection, which is so key, is not having a agenda, which I think is hard, often, especially for men. Um, and it was clear to me that night at that party that we weren't gonna have sex then, and that what we really spent that night doing was getting into this joy of like visioning this container and really being like, oh, if we are going to move towards sexuality, we're going to create a fucking awesome container that really holds it and takes it, something that is maybe more in the realms of like sacred sexuality. If you can't see me, I'm doing the like little rabbit quotes. Um, and that's from really having a really conscious container um, around it. So it was really graceful, but I'd say, there was again a lot of different moments of daring. Like the next morning after that party, I went to where Janelle was sleeping, and she didn't say I could like go there, but I just had this like impulse that I wanted to go and cuddle with her. And I was like, cool, I could walk in there and wake her up and she could be pissed. Like that definitely could happen. But I was like, okay, I'm just gonna trust this desire and this impulse and I'm gonna move really slowly and really attuned and be also able to hold if it doesn't work for like her and like I need to like leave or she's even pissed. And that was a risk I was willing to take based on the bandwidth that we had, and it was great. She was like, "Thank you for coming. I
Yeah.
actually like wanted you to come."
There's like so much here. Okay, so one, I would first just want to call out like the idea of Janelle being pissed is just so fucking laughable. Right? Like she's like hardly ever pissed ever. But like
Yeah. But waking me up in the morning could be the time. If it was gonna happen, that might be it. That might be it.
I suppose. Oh my God. But
But
to me,
not
this
by
just
a
like
hot guy. Yeah.
I mean, no. Like, and to me, this just shows though that you were so present with each other, you understood who the other was, right? Very innately from the beginning because you were so present. I just want to call out too that earlier that Janelle said when you lost presence, you called that out and said, okay, this doesn't work for me anymore because I can tell I'm not present, right? And so whether you're doing this at a party or in the bedroom with your husband of 20 years, like knowing that that is real and calling that out is a gift that you gave yourself and that you gave John at that time.
And another time that happened actually in the morning when he came and cuddled with me in bed was he started to kiss me and I went like right to my head and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sure I've got morning breath.
Right.
And
That's what we
in
all
that
went
so
I would
in that
immediately be
moment,
like, I have not been and gotten like some mouthwash yet.
right. And I was in a yurt, so I had no access to my toilet to a bathroom. And so I was like, oh, I'm in my head. Like I in that moment I recognized, oh, I'm not I'm talking to myself. I'm not talking to him. So then out loud I said, I want to kiss you, but I'm nervous about my breath. And then he said, I'm totally fine with it. And I was like, oh, okay, then let's kiss. Right. But otherwise I could have just like been basically spiraling inside my head for like the rest of the morning, being like, oh my God, did I have a bad breath? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Again, it's coming forward with the honesty and being okay with that. Okay. And I now want to go back to John saying that you took a risk, right? You took a risk based on what you had learned about Janelle the night before. It feels like if you had been in your head too much, you might not have taken the risk, but maybe you were in your body. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, I was just thinking this. I really think that we're both practicing in general in our lives and definitely here in a way of soul-led relationship. And that like I had this impulse from my body, but there was like and this is hard to really talk about, but there was like a deeper feeling into my soul. And just which again it doesn't need to be so abstract. Like I think the soul is experienced through the body's desires, but I've done enough work in my life and also with Janelle's prompting from the night prior of how much she just trusts desire somehow as like the voice of the goddess. I was like, cool, like this is coming up in my body for a reason, and I'm not just gonna push that aside. And it's not that, oh, I just was then going to do what I felt, and I also felt the like fear, but I was able to really feel like, cool, I can like hold this like fear, and I was able to also walk myself through what
Mm-hmm.
that fear was also telling me as also
Mm-hmm.
important information from my body of then how to approach. I didn't approach like blazingly throwing the door. Like I was like very quiet and like tiptoed, and but I also felt like cool. Like I'm coming in some kind of way that felt potent. Like I was feeling my own potency and
Mm-hmm.
just trusting that and just knowing, cool, I'm just gonna hold the wildness of what might happen.
Mhm.
So beautiful. Thanks for sharing all this so honestly. So what was the hardest thing, Janelle, when it came to talking about sex and intimacy with John?
That moment came actually in our preamble, right? It wasn't on that first night. It
Yeah.
was now we've jumped to the container that we set for this like overnight experience that we were going to have. And we haven't talked a lot about that, but it was a really beautiful, very attuned night. We were actually in the mountains, in his camper, in the snow, with the moonlight. He had created prayers around our space and like done some offerings and blessings. And I felt like
Mm.
each like minute we were together, I felt more and more like in my body, more and more grounded, more and more like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be, and this is who I'm supposed to be with for this moment. And
Mm.
so as our night went on, we had, a whole experience. And, as you're listening to John talk, like anyone listening is like, oh, that sounds a little bit like Janelle, right? Like it seems like there's a match that I have with John that I have not felt with someone else from like the body, the heart, and the spiritual level. And so in that way, I felt myself like opening, and we did end up having sex, and I had this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like that was like the best sex of my life, not just for this lifetime, but probably for all of my lifetimes, because the version of me that had revealed itself, like who I was, right? Like I know myself so well that like I was being met in that way. But I said that, and as soon as I said it, I was like, oh, that's not true for him.
You knew by his reaction.
I knew. I knew by his reaction that it wasn't true for him. But, and I'm not going to call out who, but I'm going to call out one of our other male Bravehearts who came to one of our conversations, who shared that like he was totally in love with his woman, and like she kept saying it was the best sex of her life, and he was like, yeah, it's like nice, but wasn't that?
I remember that.
And what I remembered in that moment in this
Mm-hmm.
trailer with John, like in feeling the bliss of this, I was like, oh, and that's okay. Like this is my experience, and this is like the threshold I'm needing to cross. He doesn't have to be crossing it with me, and I just got
Let's
to
stop there for a second. Like he did. This is okay. So the pleasure is in you, which we just talked about with Carmen, another interview, expert that we interviewed. The pleasure is in you, but you just said he doesn't have to be crossing this threshold with me, and I'm just like, I need a judge's ruling on this. That like, if I can think about the best sex of the life I've had, I'm like, no, I pretty much wanted that person to be having the best. Like, I wanted them to be in the threshold I wanted them to be crossing the threshold with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a desire I have, and so I think I'm hearing that you're okay without it. But I did ask you what was hard, and you're saying this was a little hard. So keep going.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, it was like, I was like, like in my, like my life experience was like dropping in real time, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like, oh, he said that, or he didn't actually even say anything initially, but I just knew energetically
Which
that
is
that
the
was
key.
true. And so I was having to use my like tools to be like, okay, this is it. And I landed there. And I'm not saying like that I don't want that to be true at some point, right? And in fact, like part of the agreement that John and I have as far as our Comet relationship, we have a couple of like pillars that we're holding, and one of them is to have mind-blowing sex, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
felt like for me that this was like, oh, okay, this is a starting point, but this is not an ending point.
I want to say, I think for like me, that moment was definitely probably the most difficult moment of our section intimacy journey. Because just a little backstory, I created this whole container of this one night journey of this like preamble. Like I was, and that was part of our agreement was that I was going to be fully in the masculine and she just wanted to receive. So
Right.
I like did everything like
I remember.
details. And it was beautiful. I loved it, but I was still kind of carrying this inner pressure of like making this a certain way. And there was actually for me and myself, and I want to say also part of the beauty is that we didn't have sex for like 7 or like 8 hours. Like, you know, and like just even that, we had a whole arc of a time of like relating and sharing and playing and experiencing. So that's what I say that was quite beautiful. And then getting to the moment of sexuality, I actually realized for me, there was a bit of a vulnerability gap of like things I was carrying that I think are part of what led me to not have it be like mind blowing. Because I think there's part of me that was a little bit not fully present or like disengaged at some
Mhm.
small level, even at a place of like evolution. Maybe I haven't crossed it as a man because I'm not sure I've ever been so like fully empowered to be in my
Mm.
masculine like holding. So I was already
Mhm.
in a very new terrain. So when Janelle said that, and then I realized like I was having a different experience, I was like, fuck. Because how this usually goes
Right.
is either the intimacy like weakens because I'm not gonna say anything, or I say it and she's gonna be like dejected, and then I'm gonna have to hold her like emotions for the next like 5 hours,
Right.
which is
Right.
like not what happened. But I was fucking like, oh damn, this sucks.
Beautiful, beautiful. No, I think that's really important because this very moment is what happens when there's a mismatch. What do we do? Do we weaken the intimacy by saying nothing? And then does the other one freak out, feel rejected? So what happened?
So
What did you
so
say?
what so what happened? I mean, I'm not sure I said anything right away, but I definitely like shifted the energy, and I was like, Janelle, there's because it was like that and a few other things I realized I was having some like withholds that they weren't necessarily things that happened that I was like, oh, I need to like clear that. It was like deeper soul level things. Like
Mhm.
essentially, Janelle reminds me a lot of my biggest ex, just part of the attraction field. And there were certain things like patterns I was seeing that I'm like, if I'm just gonna be fully honest, I want to name what I'm seeing that was really hard for me about my ex that I see here with Janelle. So
Mm.
I shifted. So we went on like an hour long journey where I just I poured out my like heart, trying to tell her in this very gentle way, both that the sex was not the best of my like life, and that there's these things that I'm tracking that are like edgy. And I told her for an hour, and she was like, "Oh, great." Like at the end of all of it, she was just like, "Oh, thank you." You know, like I can just tell I had just like gone on this whole arc that she was like, "Oh, you didn't have to like make it such a big deal." Like that's essentially after I shared it, I was like, "Oh, really?" Because I really tried to be
Wow.
like
Yeah,
eloquent and gentle, and she was like, "Oh, that's all fine."
but attention, I'm sure intention appreciated though. Like, like you were like, okay, let's do this in a gentle way. And yeah, but it sounds like you could tell by her response that she was okay sitting in her own pleasure and knowing it was hers.
Yeah,
And that was okay.
fully. And then that opened the door because then we made love again, and it was like for me much higher. And the thing I also really want to say, because I also see sex as like not just the moment of like intercourse. Like I really felt that whole 24-hour journey was a erotic like journey. And the next morning, I was still feeling some layer of whatever thing I'd been carrying, whatever like place I reached in my own soul's journey. And it was a very young part, you know, as it is with us, and something to do with like my mom and my like infancy. And me and Janelle were sitting on this log. There was sunlight. It was beautiful. I think maybe we had some like tobacco. I don't really know. Maybe we were there to like pray. And I just shared like, hey, there's this really deep part that goes back to my childhood. And Janelle just immediately was like, how about we create a moment where I just like hold you as a mother? And she did, and I just fucking cried and like laid in her like lap and cried. And she held me holding this like archetypal mother figure, which is super vulnerable when I'm trying to be the like potent man that gives her
Right.
a good sexual time. And it was so beautiful, and it was really the like layer I needed to peel to like get to that point where the erotic connection could be mind blowing for like me. And that was so beautiful that after all of that, we got to that place. And I didn't feel any like smaller or emasculated or less potent afterwards, actually more so. And then we just left the container both feeling so juiced, like, oh, when can this happen again? It was so beautiful.
Oh my God. I mean, there's just so much there. And like, I mean, because isn't Janelle amazing? I can totally see her doing this, right? She's like, great, I'm just going to slip into the mother archetype and hold you and let you cry. And she totally knows how to do it. Like, I could just imagine her holding that space. And so the overarching message is that the more vulnerable you got, deeply, another layer, no, another layer. Oh no, there's still another layer of vulnerability, the more pleasure it led to.
What John and I are talking about, I want to acknowledge, are very advanced skills. That this, right, is like both of our worlds and both of our training. And I was able to see for the first time, like my own mastery of moving from, oh, here's a woman who's like totally hot for this man. Oh, let me go into this different archetype where I'm the mother, because I'm recognizing this is an energy that needs to clear in order for us to go deeper into what we want to create. And there was, I got to like witness myself in my mastery in that. Like John provided that experience, but I also want to acknowledge to brave hearts listening that sometimes you hire a professional to help you navigate that, which I am, right? Because to do it with your partner is actually can be really, really challenging. So I also just want to call that out.
And
Sure.
I just want to also name on that the container Janelle and I have, that she's not my partner. It's not hitting those same buttons of like attachment that it would if I was like, this is the woman I could have kids with. Like it's just very clear. Like Janelle's 50, almost 50.
Almost one.
And I'm like 38. That is just such a dynamic that like, wow, we are really here for soul growth, that it allowed a certain kind of safety in that container to like go there, which is why I really recommend, if you can, having a diversity of different people to connect with that doesn't always just have to be the life partner, because that can make it so tight and hard to like really unfold. That's so much pressure.
Not everyone has to be the one, the long-term one. Like this person is helping your soul grow and person is doing something different. And I think that's really a mindset shift that's quite different from what our culture tells us. Can either of you talk about any specific tools that you used apart from RBDSM when you were talking about sex and intimacy?
I feel that in that moment John described of like, oh, he went off and like tried very carefully to describe like what ultimately his desires were, that I was just using reflective listening. Like, oh, like, like here's everything you just said, and this is what I understood it to be.
And I'd say that in my end of that, like one of the big revolutions I got from Janelle as a tool that I'd already been on about, but it didn't land so clearly until I connected with Janelle, was how to be in feedback loops that are led by desire and not fall into this coaching dynamic. Because in that conversation, there was some things I wanted to say or feedback to Janelle. But what's tricky is that, especially as a man, we're so trained to do it in this like coaching way, where I'm like, I see these things that you could like work on, but actually more vulnerably, I'm desiring something. And so for like me to really see that first layer of like, I'm seeing these things that like this critical part of me is like essentially noticing, and then doing the work to root it in like and I'm desiring this and bring it that way, like that tool, I think could be one of the most important tool shifts any man could walk with. Because it feels like a very, in some ways, feminine led tool or journey. And I think men, the way men are conditioned, really struggle with that, like a little bit more embodied way of naming our reflection with our own embodied desire.
So I think I'm hearing feedback loop led by desire, but I want to call out, we'll see if where this conversation goes, but I've heard you a couple times reference like man. Oh, this is typical for a man, typical for a man. And that's just like really not true for me in the few examples that you've used. And so do you mean masculine or do you mean man? Maybe I want to clarify.
I think what I'm trying to clarify, yeah, what I'm trying to, thank you for that, is like people who had male conditioning, like male social conditioning in this culture, and what that social condition is. So it's nothing to really do with necessarily my body or my gender, which is a whole fluid thing anyways, but more like the way, because I am in and appear to be in a male body, I was socially conditioned in the patterns of that social conditioning in whatever we want to name the mass cultural schmuck we are like in. That's what I'm talking about. That there's a lot of that conditioning that I think, especially for those who had that as men or in male bodies, need to work through, that I feel is still, even in some of the most conscious circles or neo-tantra this or that, I still see a lot of that not fully being examined, or especially for men dealt with. I honestly think that people conditioned as women or in female bodies are like, there's more cultural evolution that's happened that I've seen as somebody who's a man and a male leader, just around really unpacking and dealing with that conditioning.
Did you ever have any mismatch of desires that came up? Obviously, you had a mismatch in experience, but did you have a mismatch in desire that came up, and how did you navigate that?
Like once we got into this flow of, okay, here's my desires, John named a desire for me, like he named his desire, which was that I get more fit. And in that moment, this was the next morning, I felt myself, and again, like with a lot of experience, go into, what the fuck? Is this like a patriarchal conditioning? Does he not think I'm attractive? Like, does he not like how I look? Like, is he trying to change me? Does he not accept me for who I am? Like, I had all of these like thoughts running through my head. And then like, who does he think he is, telling me like what to do with my body? And in that moment, I like felt all of that rise. And then I asked him a question. I said like, well, what would that do for you? And his response was like, you do whatever you want, like whatever like lights you up to like work out, but like just like, like spiritually, energetically, like physically, like it'll impact everything. And so I took a deep breath and I said, I'll reflect on that. And I just sat with it. And I sat with it for days, actually. We didn't talk about it again. But what I was like sitting with, and for me, what I ultimately came to, I was like, oh, like I had not worked out for the past 9 months. I just started working out again. And like I was very intentional in not working out, but I was also aware that my body does want to come back into like a different level of fitness. And I was like excited to see like what things were coming up for me, for that I wanted to work out in. And so I actually sat with it and I was like, oh, his desire is actually my desire too. Right? And it's just, and when I heard, like, I really thought often he said, like, do whatever you want. Like, he wasn't like, you have to bike or you have to like lift weights or you have to do Pilates or anything like that. He was just like, move your body. And I knew in my heart that I wanted to be moving my body. And then I got to just realize, oh, he's just, in a way, he was reflecting to me myself. But it took me a few days to land in it. And see it, that it was actually for my is not only my desire, but also for my own benefit. And that he had my like, the way that I see this, and John, you can obviously like respond to this, is that like he actually had my best interest in mind. Like no one is going to tell me it's a bad idea for me to work out. That was probably like my hardest piece of our dynamic, was like having him name a desire that it took me a while to recognize was actually coming from a open-hearted place that actually served me, and I also wanted it.
I'm still like, I'm like a little activated from it. I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just like tracing Janelle's own, like, oh, I can see why that was like, I'm not sure about that. And then coming to a place of like, no, I actually want that too, which seems really conscious.
I just also want to name something, is that I had just had this really beautiful experience with him, and I was like, I've chosen him as a person to like expand me. So I am trusting his intention. I also had to like land there, that I was like, I've already trusted him with all of this other stuff. Why would this suddenly be different?
Right.
And that's profound of Janelle to have that maturity, and that not just fall into the place of the wound. And I want to say this is after 24 hours, after, weeks of building on this practice of desire. And again, I think what's different, Andrea, than the way I think it probably comes up as an activation in you, is that part of what I was learning from Janelle, that was that shift I was trying to talk about out of that male conditioning, is that I didn't put it on her. I said, this is my desire. And that there's something, and that in that, I think part of the art of desire is that she doesn't have to, like, there's for sure going to be moments in our dynamic, in any dynamic, where just one of us is going to name desire, the other person is going to be like, I'm not a yes to that in this moment, in this way. And so I also knew, like, fully, but it got to a level for me of this soul thing and this connection we both have to the goddess. We really trust life. If I'm really trusting the truth flowing in me, like, who am I to withhold truth? It's not even necessarily my truth. It's coming from somewhere else. And I'm trusting that as part of the evolutionary, like, potential of the soul medicine that we have.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I also desire the same kind of desires from her or from the other, because I think it's so beautiful when the people we are sharing love with can help call us up into our greatness. And when it comes in that like clean way of from their desire, and they're not going to hold it over us or like make us bad or wrong for not. And I don't think I had any of that energy of like, you don't look good enough now, or you should have. I was just like, oh, I'm just seeing this possibility of this glow of you like working out, and I'm feeling myself get juiced on that desire, and I just want to share that with you. And like, and it was probably the like riskiest thing that I like said, but that is the edge of like evolutionary connecting that we are doing, and it is super advanced. Like, would not recommend starting there. That it really was me checking in with my own body, being like, is this safe to like say now? And I wasn't gonna say it if my own body wasn't telling me it was like attuned to the field that we had.
I think you said it's not the place necessarily to start. And yet you talk about this being advanced, but I'm sure that there are husbands and wives out there who think their partner would probably be so much more amazing and have so much potential if they worked out more. So I don't want to discourage Bravehearts from like saying like, this doesn't have to be an insult to a partner. This is just a vision that you're having. And if it's a vision you're having, if you can present it that way, by all means, give it a shot. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And I think maybe what I was trying to say is like, because I could imagine that happening in like therapy or in some kind of like more conflict style. And maybe that's also fine. But there's just this way me and Janelle have like in this realm of desire kept it really juicy, and it never really feels like we're processing or we're fighting. So I'm not like, and that's what I'm trying to also even unpack here is like, how did we do that? Because it wouldn't have been that fun if I had been like, this is something I need to bring. And maybe, and I want to say that's
Yeah.
also totally like valid. Like maybe I would be partnered with somebody where my life is like depending more on them, and them not taking care of their like body is a bigger deal
Yeah.
that needs that kind of space. And that's totally fine. But in this instance, it was just kind of coming on this wave, this river of desires, and I
Yeah.
think that's part of what we're trying to unlock in this quest to have mind-blowing sex is like, how vulnerable can we really get with our
Yeah.
desires? Because it's just going to get edgier.
Beautiful. Wow, we're almost at the end of our time. It's been really, really unique and beautiful to hear both sides of such an alternative relationship. So, John, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing? I understand there is a film in the works, and I'd love to hear more about that and how Brave Hearts might tap into that.
Thank you. Yeah, part of this life transition I'm in is that this film I spent the last 10 years making, which is called The Village of Lovers, which is about the Tamera Eco Village in Portugal, which is one of the world's leading eco villages. And they are world leading because of their work around like intimacy and vulnerability and truth in love and sexuality, and that being the basis of building really a culture of trust and peace. So that story, their story, is in that film. The film just came out about a month ago. You can watch it at thevillageoflovers.com.
Beautiful. Thank you. And is there anything either one of you want to say?
I just want to thank John, who is actually his idea to be on the podcast on that same date, on that same preamble. He was like, if you're going to really be vulnerable, you should have me on your podcast. And so I was like, I am really vulnerable, so fine, you can be on the podcast. And
Oh my
so
God.
here we are. So,
Amazing. Amazing.
yeah.
Commend both of you so much for just like completely being this open, talking about your relationship in real time. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, Bravehearts, you heard it directly from Janelle and John. Lots of tools for talking to your partner about intimacy and sex. And we love you. We'll see you next time.
Love you, Bravehearts. Thanks for listening.
Thank you all.
Hey Bravehearts, looking for permission? Work with us. We offer Braveheart coaching. Follow us on Instagram. Meet us in real life at a Braveheart conversation. Subscribe to our newsletter. Do all this and more at our website, permissiontobehuman.live.